Most of the time, when people trace the roots of economic thought, they go back to François Quesnay, David Ricardo, or, if they paid closer attention in class, perhaps to Imam Ghazali. But there is a quiet truth that Western history rarely teaches, a silent reality hidden inside the Middle Ages. When money loses its moral compass, societies rot from within. 1,000 years ago, before capitalism or central banks had even taken shape, this was the warning of a Muslim scholar, one that still echoes through every financial crisis we experience today. And when we look at the world we live in now, it feels as though he may have understood us far too well. Welcome to the history of finance. Imagine a journey where money intersects with power, where history opens its backstage. Here, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. To truly understand Ghazali, picture a distant era, one that resembles today in some ways, yet feels profoundly far removed. The calendars show roughly the year 1100, and the world is moving at two very different speeds. Europe is fragmented, struggling with poverty, trying to shed the remnants of the early Middle Ages. The Islamic world, by contrast, stretches from Al-Andalus to Persia, reaching a peak with crowded cities, active trade networks, and a flourishing culture. Cairo, Baghdad, and Damascus, these cities were not only centers of knowledge but also hubs of commerce. Caravan routes carried silk, spices, silver, and textiles. Cities pulsed like living arteries. In the madrasas, philosophy, law, astronomy, and medicine were debated. In the marketplaces, economic life was in constant motion. Wealth, so vast that no empire could fully control it, was rapidly shifting and expanding. It was in this environment of growing inequality and booming trade that Ghazali, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali by his full name, emerged. He was a thinker who could not be reduced to a single identity. He blended faith, law, and philosophy, and spoke without hesitation about both the mechanics of money and the human soul. Born in 1058 in Persian lands, Ghazali rose quickly in the intellectual world of his time. Before reaching his 30s, he held influential positions in the most prestigious institutions of the Islamic world. But what made him exceptional was not his success. It was his refusal to stop questioning. He saw a contradiction hidden beneath growing wealth. Society was drifting away from meaning and anchoring itself to money. An economy that appeared to be advancing was, in fact, eroding from within. Seeing the modern parallel requires little imagination. Ghazali dared to ask a question no one else would. What happens to a civilization when wealth comes before wisdom? As he pursued this question, his focus turned to money. This was the point that would later astonish the Western world. Ghazali was not concerned only with religious matters. He emerged as a pioneering thinker who examined money through the lenses of morality and social order. While Aristotle treated money as a functional invention, later economic thought reduced it to mathematical frameworks. Ghazali, however, emphasized its spiritual and psychological dimensions, always considering its social consequences. In his view, money shaped behavior, defined incentives, and determined the future of societies through networks of trust. To understand his economic ideas, one must first grasp how he defined money itself. For Ghazali, money was not something to be worshipped, hoarded, or displayed. It was merely a tool that made exchange possible. He compared money to a mirror. A mirror has no value on its own. Its worth comes from what it reflects. Money is the same. Its power does not lie in gold or silver themselves, but in enabling people to trade, build, and cooperate. Modern economists may claim this insight, but it is far from new. Ghazali wrote this in the 11th century, before economics even existed as a discipline. At the time, wealth in much of Europe was measured not by production or money, but by land, conquest, and plunder. Money was seen only as a tool, not yet recognized as a force shaping social order. From this foundation emerged one of Ghazali's most striking insights. Money that does not circulate is dead money. Hoarded wealth, unproductive, unshared, withdrawn from society, was, in his moral and economic view, lifeless. Wealth locked in chests, hidden in rooms, or buried underground, was not merely useless, it was socially destructive. Money that does not move cannot support labor, finance trade, or sustain families. When money stops flowing, the economy slows and suffocates. Ghazali described this as the freezing of society's bloodstream, a metaphor that could easily appear in modern critiques of inequality. Yet Ghazali was not merely condemning individual greed. He saw the problem as systemic. His argument was not about who held the money, but why and how it was kept idle. His criticism targeted not individuals, but the structures that blocked circulation. When the wealthy hoard money, the result is not genuine scarcity, but artificial contraction. The issue is not the absence of resources, but the deliberate obstruction of circulation. Prices distort, markets lose their signals, trade slows, production falters, and the burden falls on ordinary people. Suffering spreads downward through society. This insight led Ghazali to another major conclusion. Speculation does not merely distort prices, it destroys trust, and without trust, money cannot function. He strongly opposed merchants who manipulated prices, engineered crises, or created artificial scarcity. He did not see this as clever strategy, but as profit without labor. One who profits from another's suffering, he wrote, profits from decay. Such profit, even if legally sanctioned, was fundamentally corrupt, and corruption was contagious. Once it began, it spread quietly into markets, institutions, and eventually the entire society. Over time, no one remained innocent. If these words sound like commentary on modern financial bubbles, crisis profiteering, or predatory lending, that is because they are. Ghazali was not advocating poverty or monastic withdrawal. He was not anti-business nor opposed to profit. He believed deeply in trade. Markets, he argued, were natural and necessary for human society. Wealth, when earned honestly, could be meaningful, even noble. His objection was never to wealth itself, but to how it was acquired. His true target was dishonest trade, fraud, lies, false weights, concealed defects, and manipulated information. These were not merely moral failings. They disrupted the functioning of markets. Markets, Ghazali believed, could only survive where trust existed. When trust eroded, trade slowed. When trust collapsed, the economy soon followed. For him, morality preceded prices. In this sense, Ghazali was among the earliest thinkers to describe, without jargon, what we now call transaction costs, information asymmetry, and moral hazard. Another core insight concerned the value of labor. Work, he argued, was not only a means of survival, but a source of dignity. Wealth gained without effort was spiritually dangerous. Money earned through honest labor built character. Money gained through manipulation and exploitation eroded it. This may sound moralistic, but Ghazali's logic was practical. Societies grow stronger when people contribute, and weaker when they exploit. His critique extended beyond individuals to the state itself. Ghazali offered one of the earliest objections to state manipulation of money. Medieval rulers, like modern ones, expanded their budgets by debasing gold and silver coins, effectively taxing the public in secret. Ghazali condemned this practice fiercely. When money was corrupted, trust between state and society was damaged, and neither authority nor markets could survive long without it. To Ghazali, reducing the value of money was outright theft. It destroyed market trust and punished the poor, who were forced to live with weakened currency. Debased money silently erased purchasing power and destabilized the entire financial system. While he believed the state had a role in protecting fair markets, that role was limited. Leaders were meant to safeguard the economy, not manipulate it for short-term gain. Otherwise, the state itself became the source of decay. These warnings were not abstract theory. Ghazali observed real states behaving in real ways. Political fragmentation was intensifying. Dynasties competed for legitimacy. Local rulers sought more revenue, and as history repeatedly shows, when rulers feel their grip weakening, the first pressure point is always the economy. Some raised taxes to unbearable levels. Some manipulated currency. Some seized merchants' goods. Some borrowed recklessly, leaving future generations to pay the price. To Ghazali, all these actions shared the same flaw. None solved the underlying problem. They merely postponed and deepened the crisis. Corruption, he believed, spread downward like poison. When rulers deceived the people, merchants felt justified deceiving customers. When institutions lost integrity, individuals lost responsibility. From royal treasuries to neighborhood markets, the entire economic order turned into a chain of mistrust. As trust vanished, rules lost meaning, contracts lost value, and society began to collapse from within. His conclusion was harsh but simple. A society can endure poverty, but it cannot endure corruption. Economic collapse rarely begins with a lack of money or resources. It begins with the collapse of trust. When the invisible bonds holding contracts, currency, and institutions together dissolve, systems fall apart under their own weight. Money and goods may remain, but no one believes in them anymore. From this perspective, Ghazali's views on money gain deeper meaning. For him, monetary stability rested first on morality. Money could only stand on honesty. When trust and ethics were damaged, even the strongest systems quickly became dysfunctional. Debasing currency was not merely bad policy, it was deception, a betrayal of society. A ruler who played with money was not clever, but sly. What seemed like small technical adjustments were, to Ghazali, the first steps toward financial decay. Once money was corrupted, everything else followed. Frequent manipulation led people to abandon local currency in favor of stronger foreign ones, a sign not only of economic failure, but political mistrust. From Weimar Germany to Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina, and countless modern examples, the pattern repeated. People did not flee money, they fled broken promises. Today's inflation fears and financial anxieties show how deeply this medieval scholar understood the issue. Ghazali saw clearly that money is not a mathematical tool, but a collective belief system. Its value comes from trust, not numbers printed on it. When belief disappears, even the most complex financial mechanisms stop working. His understanding of finance was never limited to prices or taxes. He saw that the true driver of economies was human nature. When systems collapse, what truly fails are flawed assumptions about people. People hoard money out of fear. They speculate out of greed. They cheat when they believe they won't be caught. They manipulate money because it is the easiest thing to manipulate. And when unethical gains become common, they become normalized. That is when danger truly begins. When exploitation becomes routine, collapse no longer arrives suddenly. It advances silently. By the time people notice, the system is already falling apart. This insight led Ghazali to his most powerful conclusion. You cannot fix an economy without fixing the incentives that shape human behavior. Laws and markets matter, but behind them stand people driven by fear, desire, and ambition. If incentives do not reward honesty, productivity, and responsibility, economies drift inevitably toward corruption and self-destruction. That is why Ghazali placed such importance on the moral dimension of wealth. Wealth detached from responsibility was not only a spiritual danger, it was a threat to the common good. He did not see wealth as inherently evil, but without purpose it became incomplete and dangerous. Societies grow stronger not by what people accumulate, but by what they contribute. When accumulation is balanced by responsibility, systems endure. When profit-seeking ignores collective well-being, systems become fragile. A selfish society eventually collapses under its own weight, and when it does, everyone pays the price, including those who believe themselves untouchable. Civilizations rise through balance. When balance breaks, collapse follows. History proves this repeatedly, and that brings us directly to the modern world, one where Ghazali's ideas feel less like medieval philosophy and more like a diagnostic report on our time. We live in a global economy where money moves faster than meaning. Inequality has reached extreme levels. Speculation is rewarded more than contribution. Markets grow while trust shrinks. Institutions lose credibility year after year. Inflation quietly erodes purchasing power. Financial bubbles inflate and burst, leaving behind the same question: who is this system really for? Wherever you look today, you can see the echoes of Ghazali's warnings. Hoarding appears in discussions of billionaires, offshore accounts, and concentrated wealth. Speculation resurfaces in housing crises, crypto volatility, and shadow banking. Debates over monetary manipulation strike at the heart of modern policy. And his belief that trust underpins prosperity explains why countries with stable institutions, honest courts, predictable rules, and transparent governance enjoy stronger currencies and more resilient economies. What surprises modern readers most is how little the world has changed. Technology is different, markets are faster, scale is global, but human behavior is the same. If Ghazali were alive today, looking at a world drowning in debt, obsessed with speculation, fractured by inequality, paralyzed by politics, and losing trust in its institutions, he would not need to revise his words. He would simply repeat them. When justice disappears, prosperity cannot survive. Economies do not collapse because spreadsheets fail. They collapse because people stop trusting one another, because incentives reward the wrong behavior, because institutions fail to protect justice. At the center of every economy are not numbers, but people, human fear, human greed, human shortcuts. These are what drive civilizations into crisis. Ghazali was not preaching, he was describing reality. He understood early what many economists still resist. Money is not a mechanical object. It is a moral ecosystem, and when that moral framework collapses, the financial system collapses with it. That is why his ideas still matter today. In an age defined by record debt, speculative excess, institutional distrust, and financial anxiety, his message is no longer theoretical. It is a principle of survival. Understanding this is not just financial education. It is financial self-defense. History does not repeat itself exactly, but if you ignore its lessons, it will still crush you. And if this gave you a new perspective, don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes understanding is the greatest advantage.